Hello, Professor Morgan here, talking about the concept of writing a synopsis and how in the heck do you fit an entire novel onto one page. Now, there's a difference between a synopsis and like a jacket cover or even like a premise pitch or something like that, where the synopsis actually includes all the elements, including the beginning and the end. So let's go ahead and jump into this. Your synopsis should articulate your novel from beginning to the end. Okay, so it includes the ending. It gives away the spoiler of the end, yes, because you're writing a synopsis. It also needs to illustrate your protagonist's emotional arc and motivations along the way. So it's got a lot of heavy lifting to do in a fairly short period of time, and that can be quite tricky. So, what are some approaches and what are some things you can do? Well, let's take a look. Okay, so for synopsis details, generally, this is a one way of looking at it. Um, One of the more accepted practices is, a single spaced page, about 500, 600 words with 1 inch margins, and you're including everything within that 500 to 600 word range. And that can be quite tricky when you're thinking about, books are like, 80,000 words or so. So you're condensing 80,000 words into 500 to 600 words. Yeah, yikes, right? Okay, so how in the world can this be done? Okay, well, let's talk about an example and show you a specific way, way that you can approach it. Okay, so we're going to talk about a book that I'm fairly familiar with called National Bestseller. Because I wrote it. Anyway, again, not trying to promote something, but it's just because I'm very familiar with this book and I had to write a synopsis for it, and I'm extremely familiar with the plot, so and such, so I can talk about from a position of authority. Okay, um, so the basic plot of this book. Okay, so the first thing I need to do when I'm thinking about a synopsis is like the plot. The plot is just the chain of events. What happens? Okay, this happened, and then because this happened, then the next thing happened, or this happened, and despite that happening, the next thing happened. So it's not just one thing happens, and then one thing happens, and one thing happens. There should be a connection between it. Okay, so the plot for this one is as follows, and then you can see how I'm going to weave these two together. Okay, so one of the main characters of the book is named Kendra White. Okay, so Kendra writes a book using scientific research explaining how gas prices will go up because the world is using more gas than it can produce. So again, I'm going off the premise of something called peak oil, that there is a point in time where we're going to be consuming more oil than we can produce. Now, I'm not saying that's the case, and I'm just this is for the sake of the book, okay? But she believes that's the case, and she uses scientific research to explain that. Okay, so the book is published, and it becomes a national bestseller. Whoa, hello, just jumped to the next thing. Okay, so it gets published, and it becomes a national bestseller. Then the media catches on to this and feeds off the worst case scenarios in the book and focuses on them. So she explains everything and just like, okay, and this is what it could lead to. Okay, then because of the media frenzy that goes around this, people start to hoard gas, and price gouging begins. Okay, now you would think that the government, this takes place in America, would do something, as we've seen. And again, this is the Republicans and the Democrats are locked up on what to do. Each of them have their own agendas, and this is not a big stretch to imagine that what okay, anyway, riots then begin because people are fed up with I mean everything, because the cost of goods go up, the availability of things to get reduces because of whatever. Okay, then people start to drive less. They will either use public transportation, or they ride, or they do remote work, and then thus lowering consumption of the amount of oil. Okay, and then the prices go down because of supply and demand. Um, and then the focus at the end, basically what the world learns from this, or America learns from this, is that the focus on finding renewable energy sources increases. Okay, so that's the plot. That's just like the chain of events that happens. Okay, so that's okay, but that's not really the synopsis, because we're not really dealing with, okay, what about the character and what's their growth and stuff like that, because that's also part of the synopsis. So now we need to look at the character's journey. Okay, so and again, when we look at Kendra's journey, so she's a science teacher and a mother, and she worries that not enough is being done to promote renewable energy sources. So she devotes her free time to write a book to try to convince people about this situation. In doing so, she neglects her husband and her young daughter while writing and teaching. She's super busy as a high school teacher and trying to write this book, and it really affects her. She neglects her family. Okay, she is unhappy when her book becomes published because her agent wants to use a pen name to change her name and her persona to make her more marketable, because they kind of consider her to be too generic. So they kind of try to, make her more into something that she's not. Okay. Kendra becomes distraught by how the media and her publisher are presenting her book. And as the social unrest begins, she feels responsible. How could she not? Because, that's not what her intention was. Okay. And then during the crisis, when things really get, it's crazy, she bonds tighter with her husband and daughter, especially during a certain scene where, her husband gets stuck in a riot and she's like, can't get through to him because all the lines are busy and stuff. It's crazy. Okay. And when the crisis ends, there ends up being a push on, to focus on more renewable energy. But all of a sudden, that doesn't seem as important to her as her family. So that's kind of like she learns, it's like, yes, the renewable energy stuff was important, but not at the cost of losing her family, as it were. Okay, so that's her character journey. So now we have the plot of what happened, and we have the character's arc, as it were. Okay, so what's next? Well, then we weave these together. We take these plot lines and these character arcs, and we can combine them into, we kind of take both elements and put them together. Now, I didn't write a full synopsis in this video, but I did write like the phrase here that shows you how this can be done. Okay, here's an example of weaving the plot and character together. As people start to hoard gas and price gouging begins, causing social unrest, Kendra feels responsible for the national crisis. So we have, again, this is the plot point, people hoarding gas, and price gouging begins, and social unrest, is caused by this. Okay, so these are plot points. How does this relate to the character? Okay, well, Kendra then feels responsible for this national crisis. So we can see how we can combine these elements together and then kind of form this little narrative where we're including both elements of not only the character arc, but also the plot points of the story. So, final thoughts. Again, I'm an English professor, and I've worked with a lot of folks who, and also teach creative writing classes to, graduate students who are working on their final novels. Writing a synopsis is not easy. And it's one of those things where it can be done all sorts of different ways. And it is something that's often asked for when the book is trying to be promoted and published. It's like, what is this book about? Because, the agents and the publishers are going to want to know. And so a well-written synopsis can really go a long way. And kind of goes without saying, but you can't really write an accurate synopsis till the book is done. Now, you can write drafts as the drafts are done, but that's something to consider. So anyway, there's the insight on writing a synopsis for a book. There you go.